Okay, one of the things I wanted to go over is how to create tileable textures. Okay, now tileable textures is where we're creating some kind of a texture with a bitmap that's created in such a way that it can be tiled over and over again and we don't see any seams in it. And there are several instances where we're doing things where that could be a benefit. So I'm going to use this particular piece of reference that was given to me by one of the students that was using for a texture. And there's some aspects that are going on with it right off the bat. Can you see this dark edge that's over here on the right side? That's going to be a problem when we're wanting to tile this. That's going to be an issue. Now, one of the first things we want to do is come in here and look at the size of this. So I'm going to go to image size and come in here and look at the pixels. And you can see it's a pretty big size image. And so we're going to want to be able to bring this down to a size that is easy for us to do an offset with, which means I need to be able to half both these sides in half to do an offset. So in other words, half the amount of pixels. And so it's usually a benefit to make it into a rounded number, which makes it easier for us, us artist types that are kind of mathematically challenged. But before we do that, I want to talk about this image a little bit more. Now you'll see that this is a rectangle. Now for some softwares, that's not a problem, as in 3ds Max. 3ds Max can handle rectangular bitmaps just fine, okay? But Maya doesn't. Maya doesn't like rectangular images. Max has got a thing called bitmap fit where it'll automatically take your mapping icon and fit it to the bitmap, so it's easy to scale it and deal with it. Maya doesn't have that ability. So really, Maya, what it does is it wants all of its bitmaps to be in a one-to-one square space. And so the first thing I would do with this is, because this student's using it in Maya, is to make it a square. Okay, so we're just going to come up here to our crop tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the shift key as I'm cropping it, and you see it's not being square because I had previously been cropping something at 1280 by 720. So I need to clear this out of here. Okay. Now when I come in here and I hold down the shift key and I pull in, if you hold the shift key, it's going to be a perfect square. Okay. And since I didn't want that dark spot over there, I'm going to crop and use this part over here. And so now this is a perfect square. Okay. Now tileable textures do not have to be perfectly square. Okay. But in Maya, your life's going to be easier if you make a perfectly square. Max doesn't make any difference. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our image size up here, and we're going to go back to pixels, and it's 1984 by 1984. Let's go ahead and just bring this down to, say, 1800, okay? And we don't ever want to kick it up in size, but we can go down in size. Okay, so now that we have it square, I'm just going to duplicate this layer, and what we're going to do is an offset. Now what an offset is what it's going to do is take the edges and move them to the center, okay, where we can see what kind of a seam we're going to get into here. So we'll come in here and go to filter, pull down to other, and then go into offset. And then what you're going to have to do is you type in half of whatever the measurement was, and this was 1800, so half would be 900 by 900, and you can see that we've got some issues. This is going to be hard to make this tileable. Now the reason this is going to be hard to make this tileable is that this image has lighting information in it. Okay, so one of the first things we're going to want to do is to take the lighting information out of it so we don't see this kind of an X pattern in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and offset this again, which moves it to the outside. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to filter, other, and high pass. Okay, we're going to run a high pass filter on this. When we run a high pass filter, if you have it way over to the left, it pretty much destroys the image. And then if you're way over to the right, all it's really doing is removing the color, but you still have the lighting information. So you kind of have to find your sweet spot in here where you still retain enough of the information, but we're not getting over so far that we're retaining the lighting information. And right there is pretty good. So I'm going to click OK. So now if I come up here to check this, and I'm going to go back and actually come in here and do my offset. Now I don't remember my last numbers. Now you can see I don't see that patterning in there. Okay. All right, but we lost our color. Now there's a couple of ways to do this. Okay, one way that you can do is, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't, is let's just take our original one and put it back on top of it. And now what we're going to tell it is color. Okay, so all it's doing is adding the color from this back into here, but not the lighting information. Okay, I still think it's got a little bit of lighting information, but let's just see. So we'll select the whole thing and copy it merged and paste, and then try our offset again. And you can still see that we've got some issues in there. So instead of doing that, okay, what I'm going to do is put a layer on here, and I'm going to come back, turn this back to normal again, and I'm going to sample a color out of here. So I'm going to get kind of a mid-tone brown out of here. And then what I'm going to do is fill this layer with that. I'm using Alt-Delete on my speed key to fill the layer. And now I'm going to come back in and put that to color, and then that's going to add the color in there, and it'll be an even lighting across it. So if I come in here, I select all, edit, copy, merge, and then paste back on top, and then let's go back to our filter offset. And it's still a little bit, but it's not too bad, okay? All right, so what we're going to do here is to manipulate this some. Okay, I think that didn't copy, so let's just go ahead and delete those. Okay, let's go back to this again. Okay, select all, copy, merge, edit, paste, and let's do our offset. Yeah, there we go. So you can't really see that seam in there now. Okay, so that's good. All right, now you can see it doesn't quite have the nature to our original one here. Okay, so we want to manipulate this some. So let's just do some adjustment layers. So let's do levels. Let's darken it up here a little bit. And let's say only affect the one below it. And then we can come in here and kind of darken this up so that we're getting something that's more along the lines of what it was before. Okay, now that's adding a little bit of a saturation into that. You can see it's kind of getting a little bit of a electric saturation, and I don't really like that, so I'm going to come in here and use a vibrance and saturation to pull that back just a little bit. Okay, that looks looking better. Okay, and it's gotten a little kind of pinkish to me, so I'm going to come in here and go to hue and saturation, and I'm going to punch I'm sorry, not hue and saturation. What I want to do is put not hue and saturation, let's go for a color balance on it. Okay, yeah, let's go with that. Okay, so then I can kick some yellow into here and a little bit of red, and I can punch that a little bit more warm like it was in the original one. That's a little bit better. And it's still got, I'm going to drop this vibrance. I'm going to move it up back on top. I don't like that. Down. I think I'm going to adjust the level again. That's better, nice and warm. And then still it's a little saturated again, so let's just use some saturation and desaturate a little bit. That looks pretty good right there. Okay, so now we've gone from that to that. So we're keeping it pretty much the same, but now we've got it tileable. So I'm going to select all, edit, copy, merged, paste it back on top, and then let's do an offset on that just to check it. Okay, now I can see a little bit of a line in there, so I'm going to leave that offset, and I'm going to come in here with my healing brush, and I'm going to kick that up a little bit, and I'm going to go over those and just kind of heal that edge just a little bit. Now you don't want to hit the edge. You can cause a seam in there. And that looks pretty good. Okay, now another little trick I do sometimes is I'll come in here with my lasso tool and I'll have it on a feather like of maybe 20 pixels. This is according to how big it is. And I'll just randomly pick kind of a shape, making sure I don't cross over one of those borders. Okay, and then I just copy that and paste it. Okay. Now I've got a little swash of that I can kind of move around. Okay. And I can make a copy of that. I'm going to hold down my Alt and move it, and I'll make a copy, and I can do things like rotate this. Okay, you have to watch about rotating it too much because it's got some lighting information, and that looks pretty good right there. Don't like that center part. That looks pretty good right there. Okay, let's try this again. Let's select all, edit, copy merged, edit, paste, and then we're going to offset it one more time just to double check, and that's looking good. So I'm doing my offsets, and so now that's a tileable texture, and that would be pretty good to take in and use on something. Okay, so the thing about tileable textures is a lot of times when you initially start with your texture, it's going to have lighting information in it. Okay. And so we have to get that lighting information out. So the best way to do that's a copy with a high pass. Okay. And then we want to add our color back in. Sometimes you can just add the original back on top. But in this case, it was giving it still too much of a shift. And so I just filled a solid color and laid it on color, and then came in here through adjustments to get it back to what we wanted, and then did some offsets on it, did some healing, and copied some things until I get the final tileable product, which is what I want there. Okay, so that's a way to create a tileable texture. And of course, this texture is a lot bigger. I've got it scaled down here. If I Control Alt Zoom, you'll see it's much bigger. Okay. And then you can go ahead and make a bump from that too. Okay, so if I go ahead and duplicate that, then I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Desaturate. Okay, and that'll give you a bump. Okay, now usually, and I'm going to duplicate this. I always have a tendency to duplicate things in case I want to come back to the original, but I'm probably going to want to go to its levels and kind of adjust this a little bit to make the darks a little bit darker and the whites a little bit whiter. Now, gray is mid, so what's going on is black will go down, gray is in the middle, and any of the white will come up a little bit, and something like that works pretty good. I would also tell you that a lot of times you want to blur this a little bit. I'm going to duplicate this just to show you that you'll get some kind of a dancing ants kind of look like in Photoshop when you select something. If the object is moving, and so we're doing animation, so a lot of times we'll have things moving. So what we want to do is go to blur and put a slight Gaussian blur on it. Okay, usually maybe like a 1. So we're going from this to that, just a slight blur on it, and then that's a better bump than the really crispy one because it won't be so jagged when we're using it as a bump. So then we'll say that out is the bump that goes with this. Okay. So we'll save this one as a target file for our texture, diffuse map, and then this one as our bump map, and then we're ready to use it on our file. Okay. Hopefully that helped you a little bit with understanding how to create a tileable texture, and we'll see you the next time.